North Vancouver, and so the pleasure falls to me to welcome you all here to our public hearing for Tuesday, June 23rd at 7 o'clock. A public hearing is a process that's handed down to us by provincial legislation. It's pretty specific how we have to handle it. It's called a quasi-judicial setting. And so I have a bit of a script that I have to read out to go over the rules for tonight. So please bear with me. It'll only be a few minutes. All right, this is for the district-wide residential zoning update to replace RS zoning amendments to the official community plan and zoning bylaw. This public hearing is being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act and is being held in a hybrid meeting format, meaning there is a combination of in-person and electronic participation by some or all members of council or by staff and the public. The hearing is being streamed live over the internet and recorded in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Public participation in this hearing is being accommodated by speakers having signed up in advance, as stated in the notice of public hearing, as well as observers being provided the Zoom meeting information on the DNV website and in the notice of public hearing. Written submissions will be received by the corporate officer or on behalf of and shared with the council at any time up to the time the hearing is closed. These may be submitted to input@dnv.org. Therefore, in this manner, all persons will be afforded the reasonable opportunity to be heard and to present written submissions. The chair has established the following rules for this public hearing. 1, following the staff and applicant presentations, we will go through the established speakers list. At the end of the speakers list, the chair may call for any other speakers not on the speakers list. 2, speakers will have 5 minutes to address the council for a first time and are asked to begin their remarks to council by stating their name. 3, after everyone who wishes to speak has spoken once, speakers will then be allowed one additional 5-minute opportunity. 4, any additional presentations will only be allowed at the discretion of the chair. Speakers are reminded to not repeat information from their previous presentations and to ensure all comments remain focused on the bylaw under consideration this evening. If a written submission has been provided, there's no need to read it as it will have already been seen by the council. Speakers may summarize or briefly reiterate the highlights of the submission. All members of the audience are asked to be respectful of one another as diverse opinions are expressed. Council wishes to hear everyone's views in an open and impartial forum. Some important notes about public hearings. Council is here to listen to the public, not to debate the merits of the bylaw. Council may ask clarifying questions. The corporate officer has a binder containing documents and submissions related to the bylaw, which council has received and which you are welcome to review. This is available on the table next to the door and online at dnv.org/agenda. Everyone at the hearing will be provided an opportunity to speak. If necessary, we will continue on a second night. At the conclusion of the public input, council may request further information from staff, which may or may not require an extension of the hearing, or council may close the hearing, after which council should not receive further new information from the public. And just one last note before I hand the meeting over. If people are making presentations and they have speaking notes that they'd like shared, there's a black tray on the table in the middle there. Anything you put into the black tray, we're going to have it scanned and copied and shared with the council before the meeting goes, or as part of the public record going forward. So.
All right, so I'm a little sorry that I'm just getting started on speaking up here. I had to eat some dinner. Nonetheless, this is a very important public hearing tonight. There's some massive changes coming to the bylaw and zoning facts of the District of North Vancouver. So I think we all want to really pay careful attention and hear what everybody has to say. I definitely have a few words that I'm going to say, and I've signed up to speak. So let's listen in to see what's going on. We'll come back in to hear what's going on in council chambers, and I'll be here adding my commentary as we go.
19 ground-oriented detached residential RS zones with 2 new zones, rural and suburban detached residential zone R1 and urban detached residential zone R2. This work is the first step in updating the entire zoning bylaw and comes with updates to maps, definitions, and the general regulations. Each zone is a complete update intended to consolidate requirements from the diverse range of existing zones and simplify and modernize the language. As a result, the zones will include updates to the following sections of each zone: intent, permitted uses, conditions of use, density, height, setbacks, building coverage, landscaping and building regulations, parking and subdivision requirements.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to go to a presentation by staff. And first, I'm going to go to Mr. Milburn for some opening comments while the team gets ready for the presentation.
Well, good evening, Your Worship, members of council. The bylaw before you tonight for consideration at public hearing is really the first step and the culmination of a significant amount of work directed by council. The bylaws before you tonight are specific to the traditional single-family zones in the district. However, staff, with council's direction, are working on review and updating of the entire zoning bylaw, which will return in 2027 for council's further consideration. Effort driven by council to be consistent with the development application process review. That process, or DAPR, is intended to elevate the customer experience, to streamline our work, and to build our capacity and grow as a community as we regulate land use in the community to implement council's official community plan. And when you hear in the presentation tonight about the consultation efforts that have been undertaken so far, which is of course in addition to the public hearing tonight, this is really the culmination of many years of experience and many interactions we've had with our customers over lengthy time, as this bylaw has been in place since 1965 and been amended many, many times. I'll just note a couple points. This is not an amendment to the zoning bylaw to permit 4 and 6 unit small scale multi-unit housing. We've heard that question from a number of residents, and I just wanted to clarify that at the beginning of tonight's hearing. Additionally, this process is not the opportunity to do a rezoning application for each individual property. That occurs through applications that we receive and review, and we do that on a regular basis. This process is more about comprehensive policy implementation, looking at broad changes to improve the health and wellness in our community and to implement the official community plan. Ms. Tamsin Guppy, Senior Planner, will be providing a brief presentation up to 15 minutes. And I know she has a number of slides with details, but we'll be covering off a fair bit of ground tonight to make sure that we address the issues, and we're available to respond to questions. We have a number of staff with you tonight, including Daniel Broderick at the front table, Brent Dwyer, and Yan Zhang, and myself. Thank you, Your Worship. Looking forward to the presentation.
Welcome, Ms. Guppy. I heard 15 minutes.
I will try very hard to keep it short. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and let's just jump right in. So the presentation tonight, as promised, we'll try to aim for 15 minutes. And really, we're going to go over a little bit of background and then jump right into how the new zones will change our regulations, and then talk a little bit about the OCP amendment, and then how these zones will be applied through mapping. So jumping right in, we have 2 bylaws under discussion this evening, as discussed by the clerk a few minutes ago. So bylaw 8799 is really the meat of the work. It's about the zoning bylaw update. And then bylaw 8787 is a consequential amendment. We'll get to that in detail in a few minutes. And once again, this is not about introducing small scale multi-unit housing. Before we jump in, I did want to, sorry, I'll get a little closer. Is that better? I did want to just flag that leading into tonight, there were some amendments to the bylaw, and we've had some questions about those amendments. So just for clarity's sake, on June 1st, at consideration of first reading, we amended the R1 zone, which is the rural and suburban residential zone, to allow future consideration on a case-by-case basis of variances to the location of the secondary suite. And also an amendment was made to both the R1 and R2 zones, striking out section 5, subsection 2, which thereby permits basements of any depth. And then a third amendment was made at second reading, and it's shown in the little map on the inset. And it was really just a mapping error where the yellow that indicates the R2 zone extended into the water. So that's been corrected. Going forward, we are considering an amendment to be presented to council at third reading, and this is we were a little overzealous when we removed the regulations relating to basements and also removed a regulation relating to accessory buildings. And so we just want to add that back in. Okay, turning to the meat of the issue tonight, this is a council direction project to update the zoning bylaw to address a whole variety of concerns and complaints that have come in over the years, to really bring the bylaw up to today's standards, to simplify it, to modernize it, make it easier to use, make it easier to build in the district, to align with council approved policies, including the OCP, the corporate plan, and various sustainability policies, and to really tackle the issues that are facing our community today insofar as a zoning bylaw can do that. Tonight is just the first phase of this work, and where we're presenting the ground-oriented detached housing, and that's quite a mouthful. You'll also hear it called single family, though for many years, single family zoning hasn't just been for a single family. So it's a bit of a misnomer, and you'll hear both terms used. Next year, we hope to bring in the complete zoning bylaw update that will have the other zones. But I mention it here tonight because if bylaw 8799 is adopted this summer, then it will give us the opportunity to monitor it and watch it. And then if there are any tweaks required, we can bring those forward with the second phase of the work next year. Over the last 18 months, there's been a whole series of review and consultation and consideration involving analysis and studies, but also involving a lot of public input. And through that work, there were several themes that emerged, and I want to just touch on some of them right now. We heard from many people, some of whom are living in basement suites, about the lack of daylight and fresh air that comes with living in a fully in-ground basement, and how it would be ideal if our regulations changed and started to shift how new homes were constructed so that basement suites weren't entirely below ground. We heard from many families who came out talking about how important it was.
Try putting in a window well. Like, it's not rocket science.
In a slightly different way, thinking about multi-generation housing in particular. We had lots of concerns about the need to simplify regulations and make it easier and quicker to build, and about building.
There is no doubt that that needs to be simplified. That is for sure.
A lot of people had seen overland water from the atmospheric river flooding basements, and it was kind of top of mind. And lastly, there was a desire, it was a bit of a mixed thing about maintaining sufficient parking on site. The work that we're presenting tonight is being shaped by these council-endorsed guiding principles. These are the principles that echo those principles embedded in our corporate plan and our official community plan, and they are the principles that face our community today. Different principles would result in a different solution. And so as we go through the slides, we will be referencing these principles. So the slides that follow as we get into the detail, as I say, we'll have a few key things on them. Down the side, those guiding principles will be referenced. So each principle, how it relates to the topic, will be flagged. On the top right, and I forgot to bring them up, but some of you have been looking at the zones, and you'll know that the zones have different topics within them. Those topics will be highlighted in the top right section. So if you're following along and wanting to compare to the zone itself, you can find the regulations right there. And then in some places, you'll see we've used renderings. These are AI generated based on photos of real homes in the community. Okay, jumping on. The first three topics we're going to talk about are all related to thinking about basements differently and changing our approach to basements. The first one is floor area. And what we see on the screen right now is a set of real floor plans that were submitted as part of an application for an average size lot in the district. And like so many projects, it included a full-size basement. I don't know if my mouse, there we go, there's the mouse. Full-size basement, main floor, and upper floor. Under existing regulations, This basement is excluded from the total permissible floor area, as is the garage. So when you look at what is permitted on the site, the blue area is what is formally permitted and would count as a 3,000 square foot countable floor space. Then you have a 400 square foot permitted but exempt garage and a 1,700 square foot permitted but exempt basement for a total of 5,100 square feet. To encourage builders and designers to think differently about where they put the living space and encourage basements to come up out of the ground. We're instead proposing that instead of making the basement an exempt area, we count all of that together as equal countable floor area, thereby making people able to choose where they put that living space and hopefully putting more of that living space above ground. Again, this is essentially the same.
Well, where the hell else are they going to put it if it doesn't go above ground? Like, hello?
Or under the proposed zone, you would still achieve a buildable area of 5,100 square feet on a 7,500 square foot lot. The second set of regulations that are changing have to do with house height. And again, if we want to expose that basement area and get more light into that ground level area, then we need to think about house height differently. And so recognizing that a story is approximately 10 feet, we are adding 10 feet to the maximum permitted building height, but also introducing a new requirement that limits the number of stories to 3 stories. So in specific, the purpose is to give light into that lower level.
This is a massive change, folks. Like an absolutely massive change. An extra 10 feet above ground is huge. It is a massive, massive change.
Maximum. Turning to the third set of regulations, when we surveyed and talked to designers and local residents, there was a desire to see this living space move to the main level, but not to impact rear yards. So we started to think a little differently about how we use the front yard. We wanted to maintain a rhythm of open space, both for the necessary driveway, but also for landscaping. And we realized that currently our zoning bylaw allows for a small kind of wing of the building to come forward into the front yard.
Look at how disingenuous this rendering is. Like it's showing the shadow line here. It's showing shadow lines. Where's my mouse? Shadow lines are the same here, yet you've got an entire another story here. Like, I mean, this is so disingenuous. Like, come on.
And also have it be 2 stories in height. So again, when you look at the regulations, this falls into both setbacks, heights, and building coverage. In the front 20 feet, so in that front yard area, you can have a 2-story building that covers 25% of that front yard and has a maximum building width of 25 feet. So if you're a very wide lot, you can build a 25-foot wide building. If you're a very narrow lot, you may not be able to take advantage of this rule. The other thing we did was we recognized that some buildings in the district have a 20-foot setback instead of a 25-foot setback, and that seems to be working, especially since many of our boulevards are quite deep. And so we've reduced the front yard setback from 25 to 20 feet. The next 2 groups of amendments address housing diversity. The first one, there's actually no change here, but I'm going to flag it because a lot of people don't realize this. Secondary suites since 2023 have been permitted to be up to 49% of the principal building's floor area, and they've always been permitted anywhere in the principal building. They don't have to be in the basement. It just so happens that they often are built that way. And these images from other jurisdictions.
Well, obviously, because you want to have all of the prime real estate for the primary dwelling unit. I mean, like, it's not rocket science.
Coach houses, now this is where we are making changes. The maximum permitted size of a coach house is increasing to 1,400 square feet to permit a family.
Not big enough.
Sized unit. And we're also adding a bonus so that should you build that extra unit, you do get an additional 500 square feet to facilitate coach house development. the existing height limit of 2 stories is being maintained. An additional regulation that has been added to both kind of facilitate some of the thinking.
Actually, I changed my mind. 1,400 square feet is not bad for like a 2.5, 3-bedroom unit. 1,400 square feet is not bad. I take that back. 1,400 square feet is not bad.
Neighborhoods is the introduction of a landscape area requirement. And to keep it simple, so yes, so many people continue to have backyard space. If you have a nice backyard that is at least 20 feet by 20 feet, you jump straight past this regulation and no calculations are required. Parking. We had really mixed views on parking when this was surveyed. And so for the time being, we are maintaining the existing parking requirement. But what the survey did show us was there is appetite for variances in this regard on a case-by-case basis, depending on things like proximity to transit. Subdivision regulations are.
So we're massively increasing density, but we're not increasing the number of parking spaces that are going to be needed. That makes sense.
Turning now to the OCP amendment bylaw. This is bylaw 8787. And because we're changing how floor area is calculated in the zones, the FSR, or floor space ratio, will exceed that is in the OCP designations. However, the OCP designations themselves are not changing in terms of intent, use, or number of units. The zones will continue to reflect both the rural residential character and the detached residential character of these OCP designations. It is just that how the math is calculated for the buildable area that's changing. Now, just turning to the last couple of slides, which deal with how these zones are being applied. We have the rural and suburban detached residential zone, or R1, is applied outside the urban containment boundary in the Alpine area and predominantly on lots that are along Indian Arm. This is an area that tends to be more rural, remote, and less serviced by municipal infrastructure. There are approximately 219 lots that will be zoned R1 should this bylaw go forward. Much more broadly applied is the R2 zone, which is the house suite coach house zone, and it's applied inside the urban containment boundary to lots that are currently zoned RS or to the Grouse Woods area. In this case, it would be applied, if this bylaw goes forward, to 19,693 lots. That feels like almost everybody, but not quite. There are just a handful of lots that will not be rezoned should this bylaw go forward at this time. We hope to bring them forward next year, but they require further study and to align with the official community plan. Just about at time, and I'm on my last slide. So just in summary, really applying council endorsed principles to the review of the zoning bylaw. We want to present a bylaw for your consideration that tries to move us forward and get us ready for the future, making sure our housing is more resilient, more livable, and in keeping with our community's expectations. Should this public hearing close, then the bylaws will be brought forward in July for consideration. And that ends our presentation, but we have lots of backup slides and are happy to answer questions as the evening unfolds.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And just to be clear on that last bit, so it is a public hearing. And so members of the public are here to share your opinions and express your concerns or support for the project. But we're really limited in what we can do to do a question and answer session mid-meeting. That really was for the meetings that led up to tonight's meetings. So the priority tonight is to hear your concerns. Council is permitted to ask clarifying questions, which I think is what Ms. Guppy was referring to there at the end, to help assist in clarifying issues that arise during the course of the meeting.
Good.
Thank you for your presentation. So at this point, we are going to go into the speakers list, and we're going to start with the people who signed up in advance of the meeting. And I have 7 names on my list of people who had signed up ahead of time. So the first speaker is Chris Enns, joining us here in person. Either or. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Council members and your worship, my name is Chris Enns. I'm a resident of the district and I finance a number of home builders active in both the North Shore as well as the Lower Mainland and beyond.
I actually know Chris well.
That operate both within the district and the city, as well as other places as well, including Whistler. And in general, there's good support for what the district is doing here. You know, moving away from deep basements, updating the rules of 1965 and cleaning up the exemption system. Those are all fantastic changes. I sent a memo to the planning department before this hearing and got a response from Tasman. I can't believe how fast you actually responded. So I think that's pretty impressive. And a lot of my concerns were addressed. And what I'm here to talk about really is just some slight tweaks to the proposed changes, just things that I just want to flag based on our own calculations. So in the first one, which is the new GFA formula, it appears as though, you know, porting over all the same sort of gross livable square foot is a good idea. And it actually looks like under a 5,000 square foot lot, it actually works to our benefit. If you're on a smaller lot, like a 33 by 133, you know, I think you get sort of like, you know, a lot area times 0.7 plus 1,000 square feet. And, you know, on the new GFA, it's slightly higher than that, which is great. It's funny, we did the calculation on the larger lots using your example of anything over 5,000 square feet. Now, I think the formula dropped to 0.55 plus the 1,000 square feet, capped at 7,000 on a 7,500 square foot lot. The district's own reference example produced about 5,125 square feet. Under the old stacked exemptions, that same lot could build roughly 5,344 square feet. That's 220 square feet difference. But I noticed in your points, you mentioned that that might actually, if you're removing that language, maybe that calculation is the same. So that's just something that we wanted to flag. And I'm not sure it actually applies. I'm not sure how many of the houses actually build larger than 5,124 square feet. So you might have done the homework and realized that impacts nobody, in which case, then it's fine. You don't need to do anything. The second thing is garages. It's partially addressed, but there's a real trade-off that remains. You know, you explained that the garage exemption was removed so homeowners can convert garage space to studies, coach houses, something the old rules blocked, and that's fair enough. But there's a practical issue, and that's the enclosed garage now draws from the same GFA budget as your bedrooms. On a smaller lot, a two-car garage at 450 square feet is roughly 11% of your total permitted GFA. You can build it, but it's going to cost you better. And, you know, and it's funny, the one thing worth knowing is carports. Open on two sides, they stay exempt up to 400 square feet. But, you know, covered parking without touching your GFA budget is great, you know, if you're okay with no walls. But I can tell you right now that I don't know where I'm going to keep my garbage because we'll have bears everywhere. So an enclosed garage space is pretty much a requirement on our streets. So, you know, for families that also need to secure an enclosed garage, it doesn't. And so my suggestion would be to maintain a capped garage allowance, say 400 square feet, the same number the district's already using in its own illustration, and that sits outside the living space GFA. Anything above the cap counts normally. That discourages oversized garages without forcing a homeowner to choose between parking and a bedroom. Third thing is basements. So they're permitted, and I don't know, this is just sort of a point of clarification that's going to be required. You know, you confirmed at council's recommendation that basements are still permitted, just not incentivized. Although I would argue today, when the temperature outside is 32 degrees, you know, people who are complaining about living in a basement are thanking their lucky stars, especially if they don't have air conditioning. So, but it is a reasonable position because having a deep basement is a real problem on our lots. We have a diverse terrain, and sometimes that can actually create significant overflow in a place where we have water that's just not moving where it needs to. Plus, we have an archaic system that needs updating, which is very expensive. You know, one thing that I would say is that what should be confirmed in the bylaw text is that partial basements where no more than 3/4 to half the floor height sits below grade are available on flat lots, not only on slope sites where topography makes them unavoidable. The bylaw defines a basement as any story with its floor below grade on one or more walls, which technically includes a partial form, but it isn't explicitly stated. You know, a partially submerged lot, or I guess a partially submerged level, holds temperature better, less heating in the winter, less cooling in the summer, which fits what the district wants to do on climate. And on a street of two-story homes, it keeps the new builds from jumping a full story above everything around it. So that's a real neighborhood impact. I'd ask council to confirm in the final bylaw text that partial basements on flat lots permitted.
Recording in progress.
You can draw it to a close, please.
Okay, last one is wet lots. It's not addressed by staff. I would say that when a basement isn't viable, the third story should be given and available as a right, not necessarily going through a zoning process or amendment. But it's all based on that report. That's me.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments. Chris ends, and if you want to leave your notes, you're welcome to, or you can email them, either or. And we did get your email earlier. Yeah. Okay, next speaker I have is virtual participant Brian Platts. Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah, just one moment. Audio frame. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Brian, I can hear you. I am going to get you to speak nice and directly into the microphone, please, but welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
And my apology. Oh, there I am. Oh, I'm glad you can see me finally. Good. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. My name is Brian Platts, and I reside at 3187 Beverly Crescent. I was going to start by asking a question through you, Mayor Little, but maybe I'll just ask a rhetorical question then. Did every single family homeowner receive notification in their mailboxes of this proposed rezoning? I mean, this is the most significant rezoning to single family in the last 30 years. You know, this is not something minor, and that kind of goes into the timing of this public hearing and the timing that this bylaw is being brought forward.
100%.
Late June, families are preparing for their summer holidays. Kids are getting out of school this week, and you're bringing this forward. This almost kind of strikes me as the same tactic that provincial and federal governments use when they bring something unsafe, a bill forward on a Friday afternoon when the press have all gone home. And it's just, to me, I just object to this whole process. I object to the bylaw, and I just want to go back and a little bit of a history lesson for members of council that maybe you know, were not around in the early 90s, but I was, and back then there was a huge controversy about what was called monster homes. I mean, it was a weekly controversy in the North Shore News. We saw infill housing just starting at that time within the district, and people were shocked. They were really shocked at what the zoning bylaw actually allowed, because most infill housing didn't actually take advantage, or sorry, most single family housing didn't take advantage of the full bylaw. And it allowed, I think it was 34 feet at the time, 3-foot side yard setbacks, and these monster boxes were being put up. And so what the district did to address that, planning staff at the time came up with a very innovative process of what they called neighborhood by neighborhood zoning. And that has resulted in the zoning bylaw today. So when people say, oh, the zoning bylaw hasn't been updated since 1965, no, that's totally false. It was updated extensively in the 1990s, and the planning staff created citizens committees to do neighborhood by neighborhood zoning. And it was actually a process, I believe, where the District of North Vancouver got a planning award. And so the zoning bylaw is not 6 inches thick. It's a series of chapters. So if you want to know what to build in Marlborough Heights or Delbrook or Highlands or Canyon Heights or Sunset Gardens, you go to that chapter. You know, delays in building, I believe, comes more from the bureaucratic process within the municipal hall than it comes from the zoning bylaw itself. And when it comes to the exclusion of basements in the floor space ratio, I mean, traditionally the floor space ratio is governing the bulk of the building, what you actually see. So if you're not actually seeing a basement, it makes sense to exclude it from the floor space ratio because it's not seen. And we're trying to govern the bulk of the buildings. So now we're talking about potentially three-story homes. You know, not every lot in the district is flat. And we've got homes in places like in Upper Lynn Valley, Highlands, Delbrook, Canyon Heights, where we're on a steep slope. And right now, if you travel along some of those streets, you look at some of the new infill housing, you'll see that on the upside of the street where the driveway drives upwards, you're going to see what looks like a 3-story home now with the existing zoning bylaws. In this case, you're going to be looking at a 4-story home. People are going to be shocked when new infill housing. It's going to happen gradually. I agree, but when these homes start getting built at 3 stories, people are going to be shocked. And under the existing zoning bylaws, the second story is always set back from the top story, from the bottom floor. So you get some kind of a setback, and it creates less density or building mass right up against the neighbors. In this, you're not going to get any second floor setback at all. And I just ask you to imagine for a moment, look at your average new infill home, in any of the neighborhood zones, and imagine, pull that up out of the ground so that the basement is fully exposed. That's what you're talking about here. But that's not all. You're going to also reduce the setbacks. So these houses are going to be huge. And when you look in the staff report, they've shown a number of their illustrations. A few of them, for example, show an illustration of a 3-story home without the adjacent homes being right next to it. And it looks like they're showing it from about 75 or 100 feet up in the air from a drone. Well, you don't look at houses like that. You're looking at them from the ground. Show it from the neighbor's property. Show it from across the street. And you're going to see, all of a sudden, you're going to see a street with a bunch of 2-story homes. And all of a sudden, you got this sore thumb sticking up. So I don't think anybody's really thought about the visual implications of this. And as for creating more livable basement suites, I really question this, that somebody's going to build a multi-million-dollar home for themselves and give up a half of the main floor for a secondary suite. I mean, they might do it for family, and in that case, fine, you'll create some generational homes. But if you're talking about creating more livable, low-income suites, you're certainly not going to do it this way.
Can you draw it to a close, please, Mr. Platts?
Yeah, I will. I'll just say that as far as who's calling for these changes, I'll just say that it's not surprising in the report that most people agree in the public consultation. It's easy to get the responses you want if you ask the right questions. It's called manufacturing consent. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Brian Platts. The next speaker I have is Jacob Foster, also joining us virtually today. Jacob Foster, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. Hello, Your Worship.
Welcome.
Members of Council.
You
My
have,
name is Jacob Foster. I am at 932 Wentworth Avenue. I'm here to oppose the bylaw. I first off agree that I think regardless of the formal requirements under the community charter for a public hearing, I think this is really inadequate notice. This is the most significant bylaw change I can remember. And it's certainly the biggest zoning change since at least the 90s. This has only been 2 weeks notice of this public hearing, and the signage is really inadequate. People
Agreed.
are not getting effective notice driving by a sign at a busy intersection when they're going 50 kilometers an hour. And those signs themselves only point out that this is a consolidation of zoning bylaws. It doesn't actually provide any information as to the content of the new proposed bylaw. It's really inadequate quantity of signage and quality, I would say. With respect to the square footage issue and removing an incentive for basements, the obvious reason for the calculation is that basements are exempted, is that they can't be seen. If you build a 5,100 or 6,000 square foot house and a third of that is underground, yeah, you can't see that. All of a sudden you bring the whole thing out of the ground and you can see it all. It's a very different house. That's, it's very obvious why that exemption exists. As far as the consultation results, I agree that I think the questions were designed to elicit a certain response. And if you actually look at the comments section as opposed to the answers to general questions, you'll find significant comments raising concerns. And for example, the majority of the comments about the height changes are negative. There's significant comments against the basement changes. Many of the categories for comments, the negative outweigh the positive, or the comments in favor of the change. And I also noticed that the questions themselves deal individually with the proposed changes. They don't address the cumulative impact of them. So they say, oh, do you want basements to be more livable and have, better airflow or light? They don't say, do you want a house that is 38 feet tall and closer to the street, and in the front 10 feet, and just 10 feet off the street, you can have a 2-story livable garage space now. They don't address that. I know that Burnaby, for example, has actually gone back on some of its changes after massive public backlash over some of these massive builds. And they've now restricted their maximum height to 10 meters, which is 32.8 feet, so less than the maximum height proposed in this bylaw. As far as the water table, the district sewer bylaw already requires that all stormwater be managed on site for new builds. You already have to account for the water issues. And yes, there are lots that have water table issues where a basement isn't really feasible without tanking it and, other costs. But, maybe those can be addressed on site specific issues as opposed to zoning the entire district in one way when it doesn't actually apply to all lots. My lot, for example, holds water about as well as a strainer, and there isn't any water table issue. I've seen geotechnical reports for surrounding properties, and that's a similar thing. There is no groundwater. If you dig down to 12 feet deep to do a basement, there's no groundwater. As far as construction costs, removing basements won't eliminate the need for significant foundations and footings and concrete for all of that in order to build a 38-foot tall building. You'll also now have to add things for the new above ground section like cladding, windows, and there's other costs to that. Any savings are really only going to benefit developers. They're not going to pass that on to buyers. They're going to sell it at the market price. With suites, I think it's unrealistic to expect that suites are going to be built in new houses that are going to be fully above ground or significantly above ground with very shallow basements. It's not realistic to expect lower income housing in a new $5 million home above ground. And I'd like to reserve further comments for after the first round. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for your comments, Jacob Foster. The next speaker I have is Gurinder Beering, I believe joining us virtually.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, clearly. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Okay, my name is Gurinder Beering. I am a district resident as well. I'm in Highlands. I'm here today to also oppose this rezoning change. I know the district is trying to update its housing and environmental rules, but the way this bylaw is actually written creates, I think, massive contradictions. Instead of helping, it's going to end up wiping out affordable rental options in the area and completely changing the feel of our streets. Okay, so my first concern is
100%.
restricting basements to, I think, only 4 feet underground while accounting them toward total floor space. In our neighborhood, new homes usually sell for above $5 million. People spending that kind of money want a premium single-family home. If building a rental suite means they have to put an awkward, highly visible walk-up entrance right next to their main living space, or give up their own above ground luxury space, builders and owners just won't put suites in. Instead of adding density, this bylaw will do the exact opposite. Wealthy buyers will just build all 3 floors entirely for themselves. By taking away the basement exemption, you're going to drastically cut the future supply of basement suites. And that's just the backbone of the rental market in North Vancouver. So this leads me to directly to the environmental argument. The staff report claims that stopping deep basement saves water tables and cuts down on concrete. But the logic, I don't think, holds up when you look at what else the district is doing. Right now, council is approving large townhouse developments all over the municipality. Those projects require massive multi-lot excavations, huge amounts of concrete for underground parkades. If our local water tables can handle a massive townhouse excavation, it makes no sense to say a single-family basement is an environmental hazard. On top of that, skipping a deep basement doesn't magically eliminate concrete that is used. To safely support a taller 3-story house, builders still have to pour massive concrete slabs, thick perimeter footings, and structural foundations. The concrete is still being poured,
Especially
it's just being shifted
to
above
hold up
ground.
3 stories.
If you're going to use environmental impacts to justify a policy that hurts renters, council needs to show us the actual local engineering reports that prove these assumptions are true. My last point is about the sheer size of these new builds that are being proposed. To make up for the lost basement space, this bylaw bumps maximum building heights up to 38 feet and pushes the houses 5 feet closer to the sidewalk. When you build a 3-story, 38-foot tall house and shove it right up against the street, it becomes incredibly imposing. Those homes are going to loom over the existing ones, strip away privacy from neighbors, and
Yep.
block out natural light.
Yep.
I understand change happens, but this specific combination is going to create like a massive wall of homes that just doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood.
Agreed.
So just to wrap up, this bylaw I think is full of contradictions. It relies on unproven water table claims to restrict basements, and it forces the exact same heavy concrete construction and wants to eliminate above ground. Eliminate it to above ground. It claims to manage growth, but penalizes the exact basement suites we need. So I'm encouraging the council to please reject or defer this bylaw tonight and send it back to staff. If council is going to pass a policy that cuts our rental housing, which this will do, and changes our
100% it will.
neighborhood character, we need hard empirical data on, the environmental benefits of it. Prove to this community that the cost is actually worth it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Gurinder Beering. The next speaker I have is Erica Walowidnik. Joining us here in person. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I've talked with you before and sent you correspondence through email. I'm here very much in support of this bylaw. I'm an architect in North Vancouver running a small practice. The majority of my work is in the district of North Vancouver, with work elsewhere in the city, West Vancouver, other jurisdictions as well. And I've worked through the zoning of these 19 different zones. It's complex. Every zone is different. The exceptions become a very challenging effort. I'd like to reiterate things that Tamsin have said, that the square footage essentially is equal. When people
is
talk
exactly
about
equal.
eliminating garage space, that's not true. The garage space is still there. They're not losing bedrooms. They're not losing anything. It's the same square footage. It's just counted instead of not counted. So that should be put aside. Those arguments should be put aside.
Wrong.
What
Disagree.
this bylaw does specifically is it levels the playing field for the difference between a sloping lot and a flat lot. On a flat lot, people can do a fully in-ground basement and get the extra 1,700 square feet. On a sloping lot, the exemption based on the perimeter calculation, they get maybe, I have had
50%.
several projects where there's only a retaining wall at the front of the house. And so the calculation, you might lose a couple of 100 square feet in exemption, but the rest of the house gets below the 4-foot transition. So you don't actually get that benefit of an exemption. One client in particular wrote an email
Call it
earlier
50%.
this spring and explained how a house 4 doors down from him was able to build a 4,500 square feet, but under the current bylaw, his house is only able to build 3,500 square feet. So he's lost 1,000 square feet potential compared to his neighbor. So in the new bylaw, it means everybody gets the same. It makes an equal and level playing field.
That's a good
And I'm
point.
very much in support of that.
That's a good
There are
point.
many other things about this bylaw that are going to be beneficial for the long term. It will not only reduce the complexity in the design side and the construction side, but the staff review time. It'll speed up review of permits, allowing people to get to their builds quicker. There's a lot of people complaining about how long it takes to get a permit. And I think with a simpler bylaw, people will be able to get their permits much quicker. I have a lot more I could say about, little tweaks here and there, but I'll save those for working with Tamsin through the next year, because the majority of the effort has already been put in. I think it's a very good bylaw, and I would encourage you to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Erica Wallawidnik. Next speaker I have is David Wallen, joining us here in person. Welcome. When you're comfortable, if you can start with your name, but then you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Okay, thank you. Your worship, Councillor, my name is Dave Wallen, and I'm a resident of Pemberton Heights. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity for speaking here today. First, I'd like to just step back for a moment and just acknowledge that the district and municipalities are under a lot of pressure from the housing bills that have been pushed upon you by the existing government. And it's putting you in a rock and a hard place. The reason I'm speaking today is that I do have concerns, certainly about our neighborhood. I affectionately call Pemberton Heights Sleepy Hollow. I bought there several years ago and built a house with my family and raised my family. So I'm concerned about the character,
It's a great
the
neighborhood.
change, the nature, and also the infrastructure and the costs that will be incurred. Another thing to step back is, I know you have budgeters doing budgeting, and you can see costs rising, concrete, infrastructure, housing costs, and all that sort of thing. They're just going to blow the budget. So the first thing is really a financial viability of building multi-units up there. One of the main concerns is the multiplex and that sort of thing at $400 to $500 a square foot plus the land costs. It doesn't seem viable for me, but the builders can deal with that. The second is the infrastructure, upgrades, water, sewer, roads, parking, etc. There are only 2 roads into Pemberton Heights. They're always congested at this point. And, to look at the additional costs just to build the infrastructure, I think you'd blow your budget on that one. The other thing is the school. Capilano Elementary School is already at full capacity. New arrivals will have to go outside the catchment to look at schooling. With that said, one of the reasons that we moved there, we were involved with the development of our maintaining Capilano School, and we also did financial, contributions both into the school and the grade school. Transit and traffic and parking, again, it's very tight up in there. I think we would see a lot of constraints going through that. One of the points that the BC government talked about to improve the livability and ensure the character of the neighborhood, I think it would be diminishing for both those. The character of the neighborhood is, like I say, a very quiet, family-oriented neighborhood. Large buildings would really constrain the nature of that. One of the things I wanted to raise here is whether or not there's the opportunity to revisit the official community plan and the housing needs report, and just be reflective of what the unique natures of every neighborhood in on the North Shore has. And as one of the gentlemen suggested, go neighborhood by neighborhood when assessing it. I know it's probably labor intensive to do something like that. And again, I understand that council here is under pressure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time and your comments, Mr. Wallen. I will just say, so just to clarify, that this process doesn't contemplate including the multiplex, smooth, small-scale multi-unit housing into our plan. At this point, this is addressing a primary, secondary, and coach house. Now, the provincial government has had very active discussions about forcing broad application of the 4 to 6 unit range. That's not contemplated in this. The provincial government may in future force that upon us, but at this point, the density proposed in this largely reflects the density we already have in the community. Okay. Next speaker I have is virtual speaker Eric Jensen. There we go. Mr. Jensen, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Clearly, welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the meeting.
Phenomenal. To just speak to your previous point just now, while it's not part of this evening's deliberations, it is the next logical step. So I'll just leave that for everybody to chew on. Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am here to discuss the profound impacts of bylaws 8787, 8799. But before I address the bylaws themselves, I must express my profound disappointment in the public notification process. The signage advertising tonight's hearing was largely misleading. It completely failed to warn residents about the serious adverse impacts of this major zoning change. Specifically, the dramatic increase in building heights, the massive visual bulk coming to our streets, and the tragic reality that existing residents are about to permanently lose their views, their privacy, and sunlight. However, despite my deep concerns regarding the physical outcomes of these bylaws, I do want to start by expressing my genuine gratitude for district staff for the immense effort it took to clean up these regulations. We all know this rewrite is the first comprehensive update since 1965. That's wild. Consolidating 19 confusing piecemeal single-family zones down to just 2 straightforward zones, R1 and R2, is a massive achievement. For homeowners, designers, and builders, making the rules easier to understand is a very welcome relief. Thank you for eliminating the incredibly frustrating and complex math required to calculate localized depressions. Thank you for standardizing setbacks, removing outdated e-height rules, and making the goal of reducing permit processing times a reality. Making our bylaws clearer and easier to navigate is good governance, and I applaud the district for this streamlining. I also want to validate the environmental intentions behind this update. Discouraging deep basements to protect mature tree roots, improve groundwater flow, and reduce the risks of flooding during heavy storms makes absolute sense. Creating healthier above-ground secondary suites with natural daylight is a goal we could all support. I don't know that's going to actually happen, but we could support it. But Mayor and Council, while the rules are now much simpler to read, the physical consequences of what those simple rules allow are severe. We are attempting to fix an underground problem by creating an above-ground crisis. To get rid of basements, we are proposing the removal of floor space exemptions that previously existed. And to compensate developers for this lost space, you are dramatically increasing the base floor space ratio, a staggering 57% mathematical increase from the old standard of 35% up to 55% FSR. We are taking all of that underground square footage and pulling it straight up into the sky to maintain the total buildable floor space. And I did run the numbers, by the way, and they are almost exactly the same. So makes sense. Just, I think the collateral damage of this up and out approach is going to be devastating to existing residents. First, consider the sheer bulk. By moving living space entirely out of the ground, these simplified bylaws explicitly permit homes to reach 3 stories and up to 38 feet high for pitched roofs. Furthermore, without the old rules requiring the top floors to be stepped back, existing 1- and 2-story homes will soon be staring at 38-foot tall walls of neighboring houses. You're trading our community's sunlight, sightlines, and backyard privacy for simpler math. Second, consider the canyon effect on our streets. Not only are these houses getting taller and bulkier, but they are also creeping closer to the curb. When you combine 38-foot high roof lines with homes protruding into front yards, you will completely choke off the open suburban streetscape we cherish. Third, the district claims that eliminating concrete basements will lower construction costs and reduce embodied carbon. But this ignores structural physics. Stacking a massive 3-story wood frame structure entirely above ground on a shallow foundation, which won't be that shallow, I promise you, will undoubtedly trigger rigorous and expensive seismic engineering and shear wall requirements under the building code. What developers save in concrete, they will easily pay for in complex structural framing and siding and outsolation and rain screen and. Finally, I have to point out another glaring omission. Most other municipalities in British Columbia are adapting to the housing crisis by allowing sensible, gentle density like duplexes. Yet, under the proposed R1 and R2 zones, duplexes are still completely excluded. Instead, we are being handed regulations that allow massive single-family mansions up to 7,500 square feet, completely maxed out with suites and 1,400 square foot coach houses. But folks, I appreciate the simplicity of the new rules and I respect the environmental goals, but I really don't think we want to sacrifice the sky and the sun and the views of our existing residents to achieve them. I urge council to reject the 3-story 38-foot allowances and really think about how we want the future character of our home and our neighborhoods to be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Eric Jensen. Ahead of time, there's
Recording
an
in
awful lot
progress.
more people here in the room than signed up ahead of time. So if other people would like to speak, let's try and do this in an orderly fashion, but maybe 2 or 3 people want to raise their hand. We'll get them in queue. Mr. Pacini in the back left corner. So third back here, we'll get through those and then we'll go to some virtual participants. Mr. Pacini, come on down. Oh. Welcome when you're comfortable.
Good evening, members of the Mayor Council. My name is Paulo Pucci. Anyway, I'm support this project, and I know it's 1965, and we was people complaining, and as people didn't like the project, so we make. I like to have everything above ground. You know, we have no more problem for the water, like at the creek. Well, same thing when it happened at Argyle School, they got flooding 2014 couple times, 2024, I remember you was on TV, and I remember myself, Long From, they got flooding, you know, and it's better for nice and healthy, livable, everything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If people
Okay, the
think
next
that
speaker
basement
I have,
suites or
back left,
secondary
please.
suites are going to get built above ground and people are going to like build these homes and give up like their most convenient living area, I think it's just a pipe dream. Like people are not going to build secondary suites in these sorts of conditions. I don't think anyways. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Bob Olson, I live in Pepperton Heights. I just want to thank council for having the courage to look at the amazing environmental damage that concrete has caused. As single family dwellers, we have the option of not having a basement. Well, obviously, if you're going to go to a high-rise situation, you know, there's going to be some concrete involved, likely. And I'd say that the days of having a wonderful Pepperton Heights the way it was are over, largely because it's been, in my view, it's been just taken over by businesses. This is something council may have to address. But I think that it's possible to have nice looking 3-story things that don't have any basements. Right now, we're building freeways out to Abbotsford to accommodate workers at C-SPAN. It's a very expensive thing to do. And somehow we're going to have to figure out where we're going to accommodate workers of all kinds in the North Shore just because of proximity to business. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Yes, back right, please. Welcome.
To Mayor and Council. I've spoken a few times before, and I think Bob Armstrong is my name, 763 East 13th Street in North Van. I'm speaking in support of the bylaws, and I want to thank Council for all of the work and staff, all of the work they have done up to this point. I think the bylaws make good sense. We have been trying to build a coach house for 4 years on our property. And so I have participated in multiple consultations with staff regarding the changes that are being proposed. So I really don't buy the argument that this is being rushed. From my point of view, this is timely and necessary, and certainly from a personal point of view, it's very important to us. We live in a 1910 home. I should say my children live in a 1910 home now. We're waiting to build the coach house so that we can live in the coach house. But it's a 1910 home with a basement that, because it's too far above the ground, is excluded. And it's a 3,000 square foot home, 1,000 square feet in the basement. But because of the current bylaws, we can't build a coach house. There isn't enough capacity. And that's there have been many mega homes built around us in that community who are over 5,000 square feet. And they're over 5,000 square feet because they build massive basements that are below ground. And so the issue of equity and fairness in the application of bylaws is, I think, really important. And these bylaws address that issue. I think there has been lots of opportunity for consultation. And I think people who build homes who want either their families to live in them or to rent them, I think, would see this as a positive move. As you know, there's increasingly examples of children coming back to their families because they can't afford to buy homes, but they certainly could afford to live in a nice quality basement. So there's lots of options. I think this bylaw provides the options for individuals who are constructing new, or in our case, trying to build a coach house. We're fairly senior and we're running out of time. There has been lots of consultation, and I've urged the council to move forward on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments, Bob Armstrong. Okay, let's look for a few more speakers here, either virtual or in person. Are there other speakers? Mr. Piccini, if you want to drop off your speech, you're welcome to do that. Just put that in the tray. Got you over here. Sure, come on up. Great, thank you. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing. If you could start with your name for the record, that would be appreciated.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Aidan Kyle. I've addressed all of you before, so I won't bore you by reiterating the things I've already spoken. And I think Bob has done a very good job of reiterating, I think, a lot of those points strongly. This bylaw represents for people like myself who want to remain in this community and remain part of this community, but we're younger. We don't have an opportunity to purchase a huge single family home, but we have an opportunity to live in a multi-generational home. And this really supports the ability for us to remain in place and take advantage of that. It also really,
I don't
when
think
we
so.
talk about the simplicity that's sort of being proposed here, it's I think, going to have a huge cost reduction. There's a clear connection between waiting on sort of complex review when we're talking about 19 different zones. If we're not doing that anymore, every month represents thousands of dollars in interest and delays, and it also represents a month that you don't have a home, that you're farther away from your dream. So I think this is a really positive change. I'm very much in support of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Please. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing. If you could start with your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Guinnessar. I live in Upperland Valley. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council and the mayor. I believe that getting rid of the basements is a good move. A lot of them are underutilized. A lot of them are dark, damp, etc. So the move is right. I think the area I'd like council to consider is the factor of what's going above ground. I don't think it has to be a one-to-one. I don't think the utilization below ground is 100%. I think that the value, if it was prorated and went above ground at a ratio, say half for the sake of the argument to be considered, would still bring a lot of value and would reduce the amount of above ground building, and therefore the monstrosity of houses will be contained. So that would be my recommendation to council to consider, is prorating going above ground. That will keep the amount to be built down, will therefore be less pressure on setbacks, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, I have a virtual participant, Corey Cost, joining us for a first time. And then we'll go to David, virtual participant next. Corey Cost,
Here we are.
welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Yes, well, I'm going to take a different tack on this material. Instead of simplifying the overall zoning regulations, the neighborhoods that are being amalgamated would now become much more complex. Any selected neighborhood zone on their own were much easier to deal with and provided their own unique character. By amalgamating and having everybody, every zone, every neighborhood being able to do the same thing, you are really getting rid of the whole character and diversity of what is the district of North Vancouver. Now consider that the current situation
Interesting.
has a book really with chapters where each chapter was culturally distinct. We now change the DNV to have no variety, all for the purpose of simplifying the overall zoning. Yes, the book is currently much bigger, but each new home has a far simpler set of rules than will be the rules that apply for everyone. And then I hate to remind people that these things were all penned, as it were, decades ago, at a time when computers weren't readily available. And there is little need to consider the volume that can be handled of the different regulations, because we should retain diversity. So currently, staff need only select which neighborhood, which chapters, as it were, of rules apply for any particular home. So it's easier than ever, but not when you made this complex kettle of fish. The path that is being proposed does away really with our cultural heritage. It should be noted that the currently single-family homes provide outdoor play areas in the large open spaces, which you now propose to occupy with more structures. You know, the places to, especially with high density towers and so on, there's very little area to for kids to enjoy themselves. The building of parks has been rather substandard compared to the population.
Isn't that the truth?
Something that is lacking, as I said, in multi-unit housing developments. The future trend will erase this in single-family homes. So we started off with my father-in-law also living in the home, that we have lived in since 1973. And I was really surprised that granny suites or other family suites would get dinged and impose a number of stringent safety issues which do not really need to be there for family members. I'll speak a second time later on, a few more points. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Corey Cost. Okay, I have virtual participant David. We're just going to move David over as a panelist. It'll just be a moment.
Hi there. Can the council hear
Hi,
me?
David. Yes, I can hear you, David. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. My name for the record is David Cameron, and I am DNV resident here in the Lionsgate Village Center. Overall, I am in support of removal of entire basement submersion. However, this plan doesn't really seem to incentivize partial submerged basements. I live in a house with a partially submerged basement, and I will say it is the only cool place in our house without AC in the summer, and it is the only consistently warm place in the house in the winter. And right now we're looking at a plan that will be allowing at a bare minimum 33 foot buildings, regardless of a partial submerged basement or not. And I think that's a missed opportunity. That's essentially 12-inch rafters and 10-foot ceilings on every single story. And I think 10-foot ceilings are by and far an exception to what we still see as the build character in the district. Again, I think there's a missed opportunity here with the overall building height in combination with a partially submerged basement, given some of the environmental benefits of that, and as well all of the concerns with building character and overall street height. I am opposed to the rushing of this process. I think this is years of work for the council and staff, and it's now being rushed through here in a couple of weeks, not 2 months. It can't help but make me think that the council is rushing to pass this before the government responds to this council's non-compliance on SMU, which is a directive with a June 30th deadline. And this entire process is being done in non-compliance, and it may very well force this council and staff back to respond to this again and redo some of this work. You know, I do object to the comments about government may force this council to respond to the SMU directive. They've given a very clear deadline of compliance, and this plan doesn't comply, and we are 7 days before that deadline. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, David Cameron. Okay, checking back in with the room. Would anybody else like to speak a first time? Stephanie in the back. Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Stephanie Wilson. I just want to start by pointing out that I knew about this meeting because I walk a lot, and it's pretty easy to read a sign when you're walking down the street. I do have some questions about the logic of
Yeah, but the signs don't say what's being proposed and the ramifications. That's the issue. There's tons of signs. I agree with her on that. But like what's on the signs is meaningless. It's gobbledygook.
Unique needs. But I do support these amendments. I do support work to remove red tape and make paths to development clear and with fewer roadblocks. This has been a consistent complaint. I am also quite excited about garage conversions. At the end of the day, we are building space for people to store. At the end of the day, are we building space for people to store their cars, or are we building spaces for people to live, to work, to play, and to create housing that fits their lifestyle? Many families these days don't own 2 cars. Households like mine own 0 cars. People should have the flexibility to build to their unique needs and not overbuild a feature they don't want or need just to meet bylaws. Speaking to basement suites. I have been to several hearings now where homeowners complained that they couldn't keep their home without rental income from a secondary unit, whether long-term tenancy or short-term vacation rental. I'm actually quite embarrassed to hear some of the comments around basement suites. Basement suites are an eyesore. It's unbearable to see a side entrance to a basement suite because it's above ground.
What?
If you personally don't want renters, that's your choice. But renters make the community. People complain about access to services, to healthcare, to recreation opportunities, to education. Many of the people working those jobs are renters living in basement suites. That sort of classism in 2026 is really disappointing to see. I do think that having above-ish ground basement units is important. Renters deserve daylight.
Nobody is going to build it for them, dude. That's the point. Nobody.
Are required to provide 1 coolable room to tenants. Tenants in secondary suites and coach homes should have the same. I do want to highlight that renters in basement suites face additional stressors when they're unsure if their unit is legal or not. This uncertainty encourages renters to keep quiet and avoid seeking assistance out of fear that speaking up to resolve problems will draw attention to the unit and result in eviction if it's found to be illegal. Older basement suites tend to be the most affordable market rentals available, so questions around the legality of secondary units elicit very real fears. I hope that district can specifically reach out to renters in secondary units to assure them that these zoning changes will not impact their tenancy. I've heard and read that these amendments bring zoning into the present, but I can't help but wonder what is being done to meet the future. We know that the population will increase, that single-family homes don't provide the diversity of housing options people need, that housing affordability will continue to impact people's ability to secure stable housing, that demand for active transportation, micromobility, and transit is increasing. We often talk about resiliency only in the context of climate and climate change, but I think resiliency is what underpins a whole thriving community. Because it isn't a community if people can't find an appropriate home or afford to stay in their neighborhood. It isn't a resilient community if scarcity prevents normal growth and infrastructure is not forward-looking to that growth. Change is inevitable, we all know that. But instead of fighting a losing battle to time, we have an opportunity to look forward. Having pieces in place to allow for growth and allow for changing family needs seamlessly builds community resilience. And for that reason, I support these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Stephanie Wilson. Would anybody else like to speak a first time? Mona? Welcome. When you're comfortable, you have 5 minutes to address the hearing. If you could start with your name for the record, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. My name is Jarrett Wall. I live in the Parkgate area. And everyone here tonight, or all Mayor and Council, I've spoke with personally about a month ago. And anyways, and I decided to put my hand up just now to speak as well, just to, I realized I could speak to all of the things that have been brought up, but I guess that's not really my job. My job is just a regular homeowner millennial looking to try to consolidate with my baby boomer parents and our young children in elementary school. And just to bring it to today, why I spoke with each of you and why I spoke at this meeting here before was because there has been great outreach and open houses. I went to one at Dorothy Linus a bit over a year ago, and there was a second round of open houses last fall. There is ample emails, and in that monthly newsletter that gets emailed out or mailed actually to everybody, it's always nice to see some of the updates that happen, whether it's with SMU, whether it's with the rewrite, whether it's with bears and garbage collection or whatever it is. But I felt that's all been pretty good over the past year. And anyways, and as I said, I spoke here because there was a concern that this would be delayed 12 to 18 months, which wouldn't get restarted until next year. And families like mine have a time limit. And my parents are aging, my kids are aging, I am aging, and through those things. And we realized that how precious time really is in this. And there's three things I wanted to bring up, just similar to what's happened tonight. But I just want to reiterate them for tonight. And the first one is the flexible living options I feel are extremely helpful. How many man caves or whatever are there in garages or converted suites? I think someone said tonight they're happening anyways, so why don't we just let them be? A larger coach home. My mom doesn't want to live in small. Trying to work with my parents here, and these are some very positive, flexible arrangements. Hopefully, my mom's not watching. But anyways, there's these three new options. One is garage conversion, larger coach home, and a third story, and bringing that living space out of the ground. My mom does not and will not live in a basement suite. Our first starter home we bought because it was a basement suite that we were fortunate to have with family help, and we bought it because we might be able to live in the basement suite because it was just tolerable. And when I hear these other options, if I go back 13 years and buy that same house again and it was above ground, we'd say, well, this is no problem. Of course, we can do the backup plan if the market crashes because our mortgage is through the roof and we need a backup plan to rent out the main house because we have to live in the small part. Does that make sense? And so, anyways, I think these flexible options are extremely helpful for a few cases. Also, we're planning for our children, and I think that maybe we'll live in the garage suite out front and the side one or whatever, and they'll live in the main house and our grandkids will be around there or whatever, all these various combinations. Point being is that these three options are very good. Someone said, how do you put them all together? I guess you should think about that too. However, I know in some of these meetings it was brought up to say, what would this look like? Someone said, sorry, I've seen in a slide, there is some good comparables to a single rancher, a two-story one, a three-story one. And yeah, it's tough compared to a rancher if you have a pulled out three-story, but there also is change happening. And typically those ranchers were 60s and 70s builds, not so much 90s and 2000s. So the times are changing, unfortunately. And that's kind of what's happening. Two, simpler regulations. Second part I wanted to bring up first was more flexible living options. Secondly, simpler regulations. Please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please. If nothing else, absolutely nothing else, please help them be easier to read and understand and apply to be more efficient. Third thing is costs are crazy. Someone on the council today spoke at a past meeting and said, let's just be aware, everybody. If we have an 8,000 square foot max, it's something like $4 or $5 million for a build, let alone the property. In a 7,500 square foot home, you cannot buy a lot, 7,500 square feet, for less than $1.5 million. If you build a 5,100 square foot home, you're up to about $3.5 million at $650 a square foot, which is the going rate, shockingly. And so you're at a $5 million home, which is about $1,000 a square foot. How many $5 million square foot homes have you seen sold in the area? In the Parkgate Deep Cove area, there is very few, and there's some people losing a lot of money, unfortunately, that have built beautiful homes because homes don't sell for more than 900 a square foot. Lastly, 3 to 5% uptake is what was recommended happens in this, or maybe 1 to 3%. And then finally, since the 1990s when these zones were done, it's been a 7 times multiple increase on the value of these properties. So it makes sense that we could customize things when they were cheap. But at $300,000 and $400,000 for a detached home back then, let's spend all the time we want. But when we have to pick up mortgages and expenses that are this high, I'll wrap up. It's real consolidation and expediency and flexibility is of extreme importance. So anyways, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Jarrett Wall. Anybody else like to address the hearing for a first time, including virtual participants as well? First time speakers? Okay, I'm going to start going to second time speakers, or should I do council questions here? Just checking in. We have a number of council questions that have been submitted up until this point. And so I'm going to have staff read those questions into the record and provide the responses, please.
Okay.
Um,
You can. You can.
Okay.
Okay, the first question. If garage space and previously exempt basement space are now being incorporated into a new floor area calculation, how can staff assure council that homeowners are not actually losing buildable living space compared to what is permitted today?
Great, thank you. So lots of math behind the scenes, and it's not an exact thing. We've tried to match as best as we can, and we've made assumptions about if you were maximizing your square footage based on existing regulations that require a smaller upstairs, how big would the main floor be? And then in turn, what size would the basement be? And using that math, we then try to match as best as we can. But there are so many different lot sizes, so many different configurations, and so many different house designs that there will be some small differences, often in the order of just a couple hundred square feet. But given that what we're proposing is that that space be above ground, it would be more valuable space. So I think on balance, everybody will feel that they have not lost any value in their home and not lost any significance in terms of what they can rebuild, should, heaven forbid, there be a fire or something they wish to rebuild.
You.
The next question is, can staff clarify treatment of partially submerged basements in flat lots?
Sure. First of all, basements are permitted on any type of lot, whether they're fully in ground, partially in ground, or not in ground at all. The lowest level of your house, whether it's what we would call a basement or a cellar, is permitted. Yeah, I think that answers it. Is there anything I've missed? Oh, and the other piece is that in the height section, we are introducing a limit of 3 stories, and a basement counts as a story. So you cannot have a basement plus 3 stories above ground. It is 3 stories, including the basement, and also
That's
including a
important to note.
finished attic. So if you have stairs going up to your attic, windows in your attic, and living space in your attic, that is a story. Now, this is, remember, you can have, if you have an existing 4-story home, like the mayor, it remains existing, legally non-conforming. But building new, we are essentially trying to facilitate really 2-story homes, but they may be 3 stories in certain situations, especially when you're working with the slope.
Your Worship, can I seek clarification on the answer to the
response was, because it's counted in the calculation for gross floor area, it's treated just like a normal story. And you can have a partially submerged basement, a fully submerged basement, or have your bottom floor be entirely above ground. That was the response.
There was a point made by Speaker Chris Enns that flat lots ended up with a different circumstance and slope lots in relation to basements being out of the ground. Wonder if you could comment on that.
Sure. One of the things this proposed bylaw does is try to bring some equity so that you're not, and also some simplicity. You're not having to do what we call a P1, P2 calculation and look at how much of your basement is sticking in or out. Rather, everything counts. And it's your choice if you're wanting to, if you're on a slope lot, perhaps you do want to build so that on the lowest point you step out into your backyard, but in the high side, that area may be fully in basement. On a flat lot, whether you're building a 2-story house or a 3-story house, both are permitted under the zoning as of right. There's no variance required, and there's no limit on having that lower level, whether it's in ground or above ground.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Next question and response, please.
The question is, do we know if in municipalities that have moved away from traditional basements, have suite rates gone up, down, or stayed about the same?
Great question. And I might also ask Anne to answer a little bit of this, given her different experiences in the past. But the other thing to consider is there are some municipalities and some areas where they've never had basements because of high water tables or just softer markets where the cost of building a basement isn't warranted. And there you find that there are more up-down suites, like the old Vancouver special, where you have one suite on one unit on the ground level, one unit upstairs, and there are a lot of front back. So it doesn't seem to impact the take up for basement for secondary suites. And is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes. Sorry, through your worship, to this question. So we know of in pretty expensive real estate markets such as Toronto and Los Angeles, shifting away from traditional basement suites has actually increased the overall number of secondary suites. And that is because that while we restricting excavation to address environmental, carbon, and flooding concerns, the local government in this locale also concurrently passed more flexible app zoning laws. And then the result is a net increase in the total secondary suites or coach houses. I think in different munis it's called nanny suites or garden flats or ADU. This is basically showing a general trend, transitioning from a more affordable but in-ground space towards more livable above-ground rental housing. So but albeit come as more expensive rental rates. The rent is slightly higher. So I think just to provide some context, the stormwater management plan and the geotechnical reports and the studies upfront at the building permit application are very costly for basements. On top of the cost of forms and concrete, it would easily add a $200K to the cost of a new home. And so there is overall cost saving for the homeowner to build above ground secondary living condition while the residents enjoy a higher quality living, which is a bright, well-designed, purpose-built for quality tenant living. Thank you.
The next question is, why were duplexes not included as part of this zoning update?
Great, thank you. So a couple of things to consider here. We have also written a small scale multi-unit zone, the R3 zone, which does of course permit, as well as houses, suites, coach houses, it also permits duplexes and triplexes. But we also know that whatever the province does, there will be some areas of the district that remain zoned in a house suite coach house format. And so we need the R2 zone. Now, if council wishes at some point to consider a different version of R2 that allows duplexes, that is possible, but our instructions were to replace the existing RS zones with the similar unit count and tenure. And a house with a suite is defined differently under the code than a duplex. But that said, in 2023, when the regulations for secondary suites were updated, we now permit suites that are 49% of the main building size, which essentially is half of the main building size. So, and they've always been allowed to be anywhere in that. So you can design them to look like a duplex and function like a duplex. Anything else to add from the team?
Thank you. Next question and response, please.
Is the City of Vancouver able to grant FSR bonus when adding laneway houses because they are legislated under their own charter?
Would you like to answer this one?
Yes, I can give a stab at this question. So laneway houses were added as an option in the city of Vancouver in most low density areas. And the recent changes increase the maximum size of laneway houses.
So using AI came up with some possible renders for what these different homes could look like. And so we've got, 1-story homes here. I've got a 2-story home here. And then we've got 2 3-story homes here. So, I mean, are they big? Yes. Atrocious? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I've softened to it. Maybe I've softened to it. I'm going to try something. I'll throw back to the meeting and I'm going to try something.
The zoning that way. Is that not correct?
I'm just wondering if staff can provide a comparison between what the city of Vancouver allows and what we're contemplating as part of the report that comes back. I want to understand that, what abilities they have to be able to add a laneway house without it being the same everywhere.
Okay, we can do a comparison, but I think the answer will still be that as long as it's in your zoning bylaw, it's contemplated as no longer a change in use or density, as long as it's already contemplated in the bylaw. But we can have staff compare the municipalities.
So what I'm understanding from the city of Vancouver, Mayor Little, which is why I want the question answered, and if they could look into it with the city of Vancouver, is because the city has the charter, are they able to add a laneway bonus above the existing FSR, even if it's not written into the zoning bylaw? That's my question.
Okay, we can look into that. Next question and response, please.
Can staff comment on how the new consolidated bylaw will simplify the permitting process?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So there's a couple things going on when we use the word simplify. Yes, we want the language to be easier to understand, simpler to use. We want to include diagrams so people get what the zones mean. And that in turn means there's less confusion and it's a simpler design process and a simpler application process. But we also are changing how we think about the rules and looking at where we can simplify the rules, reduce the number of rules, and create simpler building forms that allow easier construction, easier design, and easier review. To give you an example, we currently have a whole series of different heights depending on the pitch of your roof. And instead, we're going to just one rule that if your roof pitch is over certain, essentially over flat, then you get the extra height. This means that you can have a roof that not only has a pitch, but has a series of gables and dormers coming out of it. And we don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about whether each of those pieces of your roof is at a pitch that merits the height of that portion of the roof. If you can imagine look at any one of these houses across the street and you'll see that their roofs have a whole variety of angles to them. Well, the plan checkers and the designer has to spend time working out the calculation of each of those little pieces. By simplifying it down to just one rule, right away, you've saved everybody some time and improved the processing time. Of course, this is also work that's being done hand in hand with that APRA process, and we'll continue to look for ways to kind of improve and move this work forward. Anything else to add that I might have overlooked?
Okay, thank you very much. Next question and response, please.
What tweaks can be considered if this bylaw is passed? What can't be tweaked?
Couple ways of thinking about this. If this bylaw is adopted, then applicants can come in and request to vary on a case by case any of the aspects that are not about use or density. So if you want to vary height, if you want to vary, I don't know, those setbacks, yes, thank you. Those things can continue to be varied. But we'll also be monitoring this over the next few months, should it get adopted, to see whether it's working. And of course, at any time, council can request changes to it, and we can bring forward bylaw amendments that would essentially tweak the bylaw that's under consideration tonight.
A change of use and density would require a revisit
bylaw
of the bylaw.
process. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, next question and response, please.
Why are we adding additional square footage to coach houses when the average in the region is about 900, with only a couple of municipalities realizing 1,200?
Yes, the logic here was that we'd had a lot of discussion around the desire to see multi-generational housing and that the coach house actually be large enough for a young family. And when we look at family needs, the idea of a 3-bedroom unit with potentially some space for closets and toys, you start to get into homes that are over 1,000 square feet, often in the 1,500 square foot range. So this felt like a balance. It's not as large as the traditional houses that we see, but it's large enough to accommodate a family. That was the logic. Of course, we can always reconsider that number, but that was the number that was surveyed and supported by the community.
Okay, thank
Next
you. Next
question.
question and response, please.
Although the maximum permitted size of coach house will be up to 1,400 square feet plus 500 square feet additional floor area, is there an upper limit of the amount of the GFA for the site?
So just one point of clarification in case I'm not understanding the question quite right. If you opt to build a coach house, then your total permissible buildable area on your lot is increased by 500 square feet to help facilitate the coach house. So if, for example, without a coach house, you were able to build 5,000 square feet in your house and secondary suite and garage, you would then have an additional 500 square feet if you then wanted to build a coach house. If you hadn't maxed out your house, you could take some of that extra space from your house and add it to your coach house, making a larger coach house up to 1,400 square feet in size. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. That question. Okay. Thank you. Next question and response, please.
How do you count split level formats into stories?
That's a really good question and one we've been debating. At this point, we are counting them as a story, but this may be one of those things that you see us reconsider next year, but at this point, they do count. Each level would be a story.
A lot of 1970s houses would be non-conforming then. Okay. Next question and response, please.
Can staff provide a comparison of bylaws in similar municipalities, single family and coach houses?
Yeah.
Your worship, I can maybe take an attempt at that. In most of British Columbia and comparable communities, small scale multi-unit housing has been adopted in those communities. And those communities were required to consider the guidelines of the province, which anticipated 3-story development and which anticipated 4 to 6 units of housing. So by comparison to your typical comparable municipality in British Columbia, the standards are different. And what we're proposing tonight is a conversion of the traditional single-family zones into new single-family zones where house, suite, and coach house are permitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question and response.
We have heard from a speaker that Burnaby height restrictions changed and are now axed at 30 feet. Why are we considering 38 feet in the district?
Great question.
I don't think they're as short as 30 feet. And also, when we did a comparison for different municipalities, what we found was that many municipalities do not measure to the peak of the roof. They measure to the midpoint or sometimes even the low point on the roof. And I don't remember off the top of my head how Burnaby does it. I do have the records.
You got a
at my
computer,
desk,
Google it.
But I know when we compared this a few months ago, we were right on par with everybody else, within a foot of everybody else, simply because we're measuring to the peak and we're doing that for simplicity purposes.
Good
answer,
Next
though.
question. Is there a way to make sure the bonus 500 square feet is being applied to a larger coach house, creating family suitable spaces, rather than just making a very large primary residence?
Yes, the extra 500 square feet is only provided if you are building a coach house. But if your question is, how do we ensure that it's not just a 100 square foot coach house and a larger house? We haven't that capability in the zone as presented.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
All right, I think that's the last of the current questions. So I'm going to return back to the public speakers list. And so would anybody else like to address the hearing for a first time? Again, virtual participants, if you want to raise your virtual hands, we'll get you over to the panel. All right, I'm going to open it up to first or second time speakers. And we do have a few people who have expressed an interest already. And so the first speaker I'm going to go to is Brian Platts, virtual speaker. So if we can move Brian over as a panelist. And then the next speaker will be Jacob Foster.
Good evening again. Good evening again, Your Worship, members of council.
Welcome. When you're ready, you have 5 additional minutes to speak to the hearing.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of points that I didn't get time to mention. And I guess, first of all, I'd just like to note that one of the answers to the questions, which was one of my questions as well, was, are there any other examples, particularly within Metro, of this kind of zoning change to single family? The answer was really, the only thing that could be brought forward was Toronto and LA. And of course, it was mentioned that resulted in an increase in overall rents for secondary suites. So it would have been kind of nice to see something. So we're kind of breaking new ground here, clearly in Metro. As for Vancouver Special with the basement suite on the ground floor, again, those are two-story houses, of course, and those are the types of homes, and they're not untypical in the district and other municipalities around the region where the main living area, all the main living area is the second floor, and the basement is really considered the main floor. But of course, what this bylaw is showing is we're really not talking about that with this one. We're not creating a new Vancouver Specials. We're creating, again, as many speakers have mentioned, multi-million-dollar homes where, other than for generational homes, and I agree, but people can do that anyway. They can partition their home. I have no objections to the coach houses, although I think 1,400 square feet is a little bit too large. And the cost of building a coach house for just general rental is extremely prohibitive. But again, for multi-family homes or multi-generational homes, it could make sense. So I think they'll be very rare. But my solution to this whole thing is somewhat more simple. I did chair, back in the 90s, I did chair the neighborhood zoning for the Edgemont area. And I felt at the time that the maximum 26-foot roof height was a mistake. I felt that it was too low and was going to result in basements fully underground. And that's, of course, what happened. And I think that the zoning bylaw itself is very good because it requires, again, second-story setbacks, 6-foot side yard setbacks. It's very, very good. But if it was raised to 30 feet, it really wouldn't make that much of a difference to the overall streetscape. But it would allow the homes to be pulled up out of the basement suites to be pulled up out of the ground. And within the existing zoning bylaw, basement suites are exempt as long as they are less than 4 feet above the ground. Well, we could keep that. Raised basements, if you want to create more livable basements with windows, just look at the zoning bylaws, raise the maximum roof height a certain degree to allow basements to come up out of the ground where there are areas where there are current these so-called light wells, and that would create more livable basement suites, create more affordable suites that would be far more likely to be rented out for people that have difficulty living in this area, as opposed to multi-million-dollar three-story homes where it's extremely unlikely, in my view, that they're going to be used for lower income rental housing for people who would like to break into this market and maybe live and work in this area. I think it's going to be extremely unlikely. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Brian Platts. Next speaker I have is Jacob Foster, followed by Eric Jensen. Jacob Foster is joining us virtually. Yes,
Recording
clearly.
in
Welcome. You have
progress.
5 more minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you, Your Worship. The reference to the Burnaby change, I'm was unable to find the change on my phone while I was waiting, but that happened, from my understanding, October 2025. It was 10 meters, so it works out to 32.8 feet. I don't have the bylaw in front of me, though, so I don't know exactly where that measurement is taken from for the calculation. As far as the basement issue and the exemption, I agree that just raising the maximum height currently, and I agree with many of the pitch issues about the maximum height, simplifying that. But if we just raise the maximum height of the buildings slightly, not to 38 feet, then this would allow for the basements to be pulled out, still provide for this exemption issue, and not put a 6,000 square foot house above ground when currently it would be like 3,500 square feet above ground. I would just ask you to think that these homes, once built, they're going to be there for realistically at least 30 years, perhaps 100 plus years. I mean, there was a gentleman who referred to a house built in 1910 that he lives in. Once these homes are built under this new bylaw, if passed, they can't really, it can't be undone. They're there for the life of the building. And I would urge you to walk around some of our single family neighborhoods in the district and imagine the biggest house on the street being an entire story taller, like pulled out of the ground so the basement's fully above ground, so the garage is 2 stories, and so that it's moved closer to the street. And that's going to tower over the buildings around it. The new buildings that we do have that have been built in the last 20 some odd years, the 2-story ones, and older than that as well, even those are going to be dwarfed by that. And those buildings as well, those homes are going to be there for anywhere from 30 to 100 years after they were built. So we're going to have little pinpricks of essentially 40-foot buildings around neighborhoods that are going to be able to be seen for blocks, surrounded by 2 and 1-story buildings. And slowly, I agree, well, it'll happen slowly, but certainly initially when these start going up, it's going to be quite an extreme difference for people. And it will take a very long time before it becomes more consolidated with these 3-story buildings all over. And once that does happen, it's going to completely change the character of the neighborhood. And those are my only remaining comments. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Thank you very much for your comments. Jacob Foster, the next speaker I have is Eric Jensen, followed by David Cameron.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 5 additional minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. Hopefully I won't take up all 5. I do want to comment on the clarity on the coach house side of things and think that that's great. And I may walk back a little bit of what I said in terms of the height. So I have been listening to what everybody has been saying, and I've been having a little bit of fun on my computer. And so this is possibly what a 3-story home might look like amongst a single-story home. And I mean, it's a little bit big, obviously, but I mean, it gives you a sense of the magnitude between a single-story home and a 3-story home. And I just thought the public might like to see what that looks like. Now, I mean, not a lot of neighborhoods only have single-story homes above ground only anymore. A lot of neighborhoods have 2-story homes above ground, and we're talking about installing 3-story homes nestled in amongst those. And I mean, this is kind of sort of what it might look like, possibly, maybe, kind of. I don't know. I'm not an architect. I kind of know how to build them, but I'm not an architect. So, I mean, I think there might be an opportunity here for us to give this some serious consideration. I really think it's important for everybody to be thinking about what the ramifications are for specifically. I worry about people that have views and have paid a metric buttload of money for homes that have views of say UBC or downtown or something like that. I think that this and the way that the signage was done, like it's not giving those people that have those homes with those views ample opportunity to come and plead their case. Kind of like if I'd known about the stormwater changes that you guys made 2 years ago, I sure as hell would have been here banging on that drum. But I've already banged on that drum enough, and I'm sure you guys don't want to hear that anymore. Anyways, I think there's some opportunity for thinking about things, and yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Eric Jensen. Next speaker I have is David Cameron, followed by, I think, Corey Cost. He expressed an interest in speaking a second time, but I have. Next speaker is David Cameron.
Hi, Your Worship and council members. Can you hear me?
Clearly, welcome. You have an additional 5 minutes to speak to the hearing.
Thank you for your time today. I do have some additional comments and maybe some clarifying questions just for council to look into on their own. If I'm understanding this correct, as far as building height calculations, if I have a fully submerged basement, can I have 2 stories above ground that are 16 feet each and still comply with these height requirements?
Oh, good question.
For the bonus 500 coach house, if an existing house is already over the allowed density, are they also given an additional 500 for a coach house? And I for sure would oppose the concept of adding a 500 square foot to buildable square foot space if a coach house is built at 100 square foot. And I would hope that council and staff can foresee a lot of these edge cases around height and around coach house sizing, because although
good points,
maybe the majority won't be this, there will definitely be many taking advantage of it. So again, for building height and for square footage to the coach houses. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, David Cameron. Next virtual speaker, second time, Corey Cost.
Yes, Your Worship.
Welcome,
Cost.
Corey. You have 5 additional minutes to speak to the hearing.
Okay, this is picking up a lot of little pieces of information that may be helpful for council members to know. So first of all, my home. My home is 75 years old, and I'm the second owner. I noticed looking at the pictures of some of these homes that the front yard seems to be paved over almost all the way and doesn't seem to have a limit on the hard surface. It's a issue that we've been unable to get staff to enforce. For the Edgemont area, many of the homes just paved far beyond the limits that you should. And it's it's to do with the rainwater and where it goes. The attendance on some of these meetings that formed the basis of the recommendations of staff seem very insignificant compared to, for example, the large meetings that were held around the district for the OCP. The attendance on meeting this issue were, in my opinion, dismally low. Now, I have a basement, as I said, and the front is fully underground. So it looks like a bungalow from the street. And from the rear, it's just slightly above the backyard. So it's a pleasure always to sleep down there for any of the companies. They have no qualms about living there because it's what you view is all above ground. And one of my passionate hobbies, of course, is I love the audio video system I installed some time ago, and I play it extremely loud. I know you can use headphones to get that kind of loudness, but there's nothing like something thumping at your body, as it were, for a audio video system roaring away. And fortunately, it's located at the front, so it's fully surrounded, except in one direction. And I've never had any complaints from any of the neighbors because I think they are unable to hear anything. So there are lots of benefits of basements that most people think aren't an asset, and they really are. Now, it's not clear if basements are going to be grandfathered. The existing ones, that is. I'd hate to see.
I think they said that they would be grandfathered.
The amount of FSR that you can build be lowered. So some clarification in that area would be much appreciated. So I think that's about all the little points that I want. Oh, one more point. There is such a thing as green concrete, which offer far less CO2 emissions. So there are technical ways to improve things for basements. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Corey Cost. Okay, I'm going to return back to the room here. Would anybody else like to speak a first or second time? Mr. Puccini?
Like this. Just look and just on the photo here on the okay.
Unfortunately, it's
this I just see the picture before. The guy that show a big home. This sorry. Okay. No.
Easier for you, easier.
Yeah. Okay. Now this I'll have a lot. These two lots, 33-foot lots, is divided by two lots. Is the guy that showed before? Maybe it's a big home. Yeah, I can see Tommy did a very good job. Didn't look very high building. It looked very nice job. He did a very nice job. Then I have a garage detached. You have extra square feet, and you have more parking. You have 3 parking one side and 3 parking the other side. So I have no problem with enough parking for the rental and for the people living upstairs. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, would anybody else like to address the hearing a first or second time? Well, welcome. When you're comfortable, you have additional 5 minutes to address the hearing.
Bob Olson, Pittsburgh Heights. Just getting back briefly to how things look as opposed to how they are. It's 2026, and we had these 2030 targets, and it turns out that like I've just spent the last 3 years in college learning about the latest green building technology and stuff like that. It's pretty substantial. And one of the things that came up
It's
from
also
the engineers and the
useless, but I
scientists and
mean,
stuff that
that's
put all
okay.
this stuff together was that basically our climate goals could be reached if we just cleaned up our buildings. If everybody
No.
on their way home from the pipeline protest went to their building, wherever it is, and made that
How does he
like,
think the materials get manufactured?
carbon zero, we would make our climate target of
Rainbows
2030.
and unicorn
Just leave Fort
farts?
McMurray the way it is. Places
Good
like Squamish and
Lord.
Brackendale, they're getting into the passive house technology. It is mandated and it's being employed. These buildings have no heating system. They don't need it. They're so well sealed. They have
They do need them,
heat
and
recovery
anybody that
ventilators
lives in a
give the
passive
best
home,
indoor air quality that you
anybody that builds a passive home and lives in it puts in heating and cooling within 1 year of moving in. Every single person.
32% of the heat goes straight into the ground. So all those buildings we built, like Norgate, stuff like that, slab on grade, 32% of the heat goes right into the ground, right off the bat. If you got a partially submerged situation, basement or a cellar, worse yet. Most of Japan, I've spent a lot of time in Japan, there's 120 million people there. They don't have basements. We can do it too. Yeah, our neighborhoods may look different, but we're at a point in the climate thing where we don't really have a whole lot of choices left. I just once again I want to say thanks again to council for taking this on, because it's not common knowledge, and it's just something that needs to be done. So thanks again.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Bob Olson. Would anybody else like to address the hearing a first or second time? Okay, I'm just going to check back in with staff. I believe a couple of more questions have come in. If you could provide the questions into the record and your responses, please.
Yeah, well, I'll just go to the front so that we can use some slides.
Sure.
You want to be frustrated and like just be mad at her for whatever reason sometimes, but she is so lovely and so sweet. It's hard.
First question is, why are the majority of condos in the district that are being approved between 500 and 800 square feet with few that are 1,400 square feet, but we are encouraging coach houses to accommodate families?
And this one doesn't require a slide, but let me.
Question 14.
Thank you. So essentially, when we look at multifamily housing, there is no limit on having larger units. And so if a multifamily project it wants to include family housing, it can absolutely include larger units. It's more looking at, as we think about the diversity of housing stock and how we can have more options. This is one option we can consider. It's not one that council must consider, but it's an option that's being presented and is included in the bylaw. And it's one that
Thanks.
is
There's
large
somebody
enough
that's been
for a
watching the
family,
entire stream almost, it looks like.
recognizing that
Not
if you're
sure who
in a
that is. Maybe it's
ground-oriented
me.
situation where you want that
I
ability
don't think
to
so,
go
though.
out and play in a yard,
But thank you for
potentially
watching.
be next to another generation of your family in the adjacent home. It just allows that flexibility, gives a little bit more freedom to create that space. Next question.
Would staff be able to comment on the suggestion made by a second-time speaker to raise the allowable height of the basement above the ground from the existing 4 feet?
Okay. Let me just. Here we go. This slide, and let me just go to the slideshow,
Oh my,
may help. There's a couple
R1,
of questions
R2, like
related
we
to
built that
height. We've
house.
had quite a lot of discussion about height. And so I just wanted to clarify this may help the conversation a little bit. On
We
the
totally built
left-hand,
that
we
house.
see an existing house just built up the street from here, and you've seen many of them, many homes like this. They're three-story homes where under existing regulations, they're on the high side of the street and they've cut out into the grade.
That's funny.
To access the garage, and that's permitted through a localized depression regulation. And in terms of the number of stories, they are 3 stories, but in terms of the height under the existing rules, you actually start counting from the corner up. What we're proposing is that you start counting from the bottom up, and that this area counts as a story. So you're not adding 3 stories from up here, but rather you're including this as your 3rd story or your bottom story.
But it's that on a slope?
That one is on a slope. It's on the uphill side of the street. So, and you'll see this all through the district where you kind of cut into the slope to access your garage. And of course, next to the garage is living space that it is probably has a window well on the side in the side yard.
So then the comparison would be on a flat.
Yeah. And so the next, these 2 renderings are of homes. The one on the left is just a couple blocks down here on West 15th. I have changed the color of it for the purposes of anonymity, but I've just given the boat away. It's a 3-story home. Many of the homes on that block are, well, it's a mixed block, to be quite honest. So I can't remember what's right next door. If we pull it up on Google Street View or you drive by it later this evening, you can see the relationship. This home is also a 3-story home. The homes beside it are 2.5, maybe some 3 stories as well. And they are relatively flat lots. There's probably a bit of slope to them, but you can see it's 1, 2, 3. This is already occurring. So we have some of those worst case scenarios. And the other thing I would flag, and I may have a slide for it if I.
Samson, can you just tell us about the height of those houses? They're not 38 feet.
No, they're not. I would, I think they're kind of in the 35-ish range. If you imagine each floor is at least 10 feet, then you're going to be with a peak probably coming over the 30 feet. But whether they're 33, 35, I'm not sure.
I think that's important.
Mm.
And we haven't seen that.
And the other piece of this story, if I can find the slide, it doesn't really matter. I think one of the speakers made this point. Often we're surprised with new construction because the homes that tend to be torn down tend to be those 1950s small homes. Like the one next to me, it was 1,200 square feet and replaced with a perfectly lovely home. But it's much larger than what was there before. And many of our neighbors stopped by during the construction process, surprised at the size. Now it's built, the landscaping's in, nobody has any concerns with it. So it is a bit of the change that happens over time. That's all right. Let's get back to the exact question. If you could repeat it for me,
Sure.
And we can kind of flag any pieces that were missed.
The question was, would staff be able to comment on the suggestion made by a second-time speaker to raise the allowable height of basement above ground from the existing 4 feet?
So again, basements of any depth are permitted. They account whether they're fully in ground or fully above ground. There's no under the proposed bylaw. So if you want to have a basement, you can have a basement. No basements are going to be non-conforming. Again, this was council's recommendation and amendment to the bylaw on June 1st. So all existing basements remain permitted.
Do they vote at public hearings?
All basements, whether in ground or above ground, count equally towards their square footage. And then the 4 feet in and out, that P1, P2 calculation that's been done for a number of years is no longer required, would just count as straight square footage.
We asked for the worst case scenario during the workshops on this issue of height and removals of basements. Can staff provide images to illustrate these scenarios, such as the Norgate neighborhood?
I mean, this one does a little bit, sorry, if I maybe move this writing. You
I
can,
think the criticism with these ones is that they're seen as
High up.
hills, and
yeah.
it's kind of, you know,
Okay.
none of these are being depicted in the same way to show the true scenarios, and that you can't compare them.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. If I take pictures of existing homes, then I'm kind of low down and you don't get the real sense. And I don't also don't, but
You
we
get
can
the
definitely
exact
bring
real
some back because
sense.
we have a range of images showing homes around the district. And I think what we found is the impression is always worst when it's on the uphill side of the street, on a street that has a cross slope. And so you're looking way up at these 3-story homes. At least that's been my sense of the bulk, but you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think depending on what kind of home you're in and how you use your side yard and your rear yard, you're going to feel that impact a little bit differently. But make no mistake. This is a change. This is making homes taller and bulkier. Absolutely. And again, that comes back to those principles. If council so chooses, we do not need to maintain the developable area. We could reduce the developable area, and that would reduce the bulk of the home. We could reduce some of, we could change how we think about this. But given the principles that we're working with, this is what we felt was a reasonable package to bring forward for your consideration.
Thank you. Next question and response, please.
Does a fully submerged basement count against the total height, or is it measured from grade?
That was asked and answered already, I think.
Yeah.
Are the building coverage and hard surface coverage maximums changed by this bylaw?
On the building coverage and
hard surface coverage maximums changed by the.
It's too bad there's not a Spruce Hill logo right in the driveway
there are a couple changes here. So essentially, yes, building coverage is increased a little bit. We still use a building coverage as that ratio of building to lot area. We've increased it a little bit to encourage 2-story construction and not force people to do that 3rd story. But we've also brought in the landscape area requirement. And if I go to that slide, I've got the actual numbers. Bear with me just a moment. Here we go. So there are 2 numbers. The smaller lots have the higher percentage of building coverage because they are more constrained. So they have a 55% building coverage and a 35% landscape area requirement. And the larger lots, that's over 5,000 square feet, they have 45% building coverage and a 45% landscape area requirement.
Thank you. Next question or response.
Why do we feel the need to allow heights of up to 38 feet when basements were fully submerged only to gain full height ceiling on the main by design?
Good question. Here, this one might help with this. Essentially, it's this notion of if we are allowing this entire area to be above ground, to be daylighted, if you will, then we need to somehow consider how that affects building height. And if we're also at the same time trying to simplify the building height regulations and go to the roof peak, then we need to kind of add that full story of height. If, however, we're comfortable with a choice like this on the right-hand side of this image where only a piece of that basement is exposed, then you wouldn't go as tall. But if you actually want a door and a sunken patio and that ability to step outside your unit, then having the full freedom of that full 38 feet gives you that flexibility. And again, with the 3-story limit imposed at the same time. It goes hand in hand, protecting you from that notion of a 4-story build out.
I'm not sure if that answered my question.
Can you
And-
clarify it? I think
Well, because we never forced architects to design fully submerged basements. We exempted the basement. And because they wanted full height ceilings on the main, they recognized that if they did submerge the basements, they could get that under their square footage because of the exemption.
Hmm.
it's from grade.
And we didn't stop it. And now we're pulling the basements out with another impact. We have lots of basement suites that have never been fully submerged. They became fully submerged in the late 90s and early 2000s because of this need to reach 10-foot ceilings on the main.
I think it also coincides with a lot of the work that was done in the 90s in response to the monster house issue that was raised by some of our speakers tonight. And when that happened, we brought in much more restrictive eave height and building height regulations. And to make that eave height work, you had to, and still have a 2-story home, you had to really push the basement much further into the ground. Now, how much of that is about our height calculations and how much of that has become the fashion over the last 30 years? I don't know which is the driving force nowadays. I know that almost all homes are built with a fully buried basement. And I know, and people like Brett can probably back me up with more details. But what we're seeing across the board is to make the eave height calculations work, you are really limited in your ability to add a second floor. And so you have to kind of really push your basement in.
Okay, thank you. Next question and response, please.
You can't see the response.
If the zoning bylaw is passed, does that make basements non-conforming? If so, what renovations would the owner be allowed to make to the basement? What are the general nature of restrictions on non-conforming properties? I believe this was answered a little bit already.
Yeah, basements will not become non-conforming because basements are still permitted. And for any, also in general, these regulations are more permissive than any of the 19 zones that we have. So you're far less, if you're already non-conforming, then you may remain non-conforming, but most homes built onto the existing zoning regulations, if they conform today, they will probably conform tomorrow or in the future, should this bylaw be adopted.
Martin, if you clarify that we've put an amendment into this bylaw in order to.
Yeah, James, I think it was done so that because the eave heights and the ridge heights were what they were, people decided to go fully subterranean so that they could get that like 9 or 10 foot ceiling height on the main floor, I think.
Including them in the gross floor area, but to not ban the basements. So from June 1st forward, all the proposal that we've been considering is that basements are still permitted. They just count against your gross floor area.
If I may, if I can ask a follow-up question, because it kind of ties in with an earlier question, and I think it would be too hard for me to try to type it out. Can I?
Or you got some time, but
Can I try?
vacation, isn't it? We've had 3 questions now about basements being non-conforming. They are now conforming, and they just now are included in the height.
Okay, so if you currently live in a house that has a semi-submerged basement, how do you calculate if you've reached your maximum 1,400 for a coach house? I'm just trying to think, what is the upper limit now in a property that has a basement that you don't intend to change, but you just want to build a coach house?
Okay, for the sake of argument, if we look at the pictures on the screen.
Sorry, does that make sense? Like
These are basements, in this case, some partially submerged. They've probably, and I haven't run the numbers on this particular house, but it's a fairly new house, so I'm guessing they've come close to their maximum potential floor space.
Right.
Whether or not they had the basement, same math would apply. They've maximized under the existing zoning. So the proposed zoning is probably a similar buildable potential. So they may not be able to build a 1,400 square foot coach house because they've used so much of the square footage in their main house. They could still build a 500 square foot coach house as the bylaw is written with that proposed extra 500 square feet
Makes
for
sense.
a coach house. It's exactly to address this notion of you have an existing house, but council has expressed interest in facilitating coach houses. So that allows that consideration of a coach house. You only get to build a coach house larger than 500 square foot if you have extra square footage from your site. So for example,
I ran
if
the numbers on this
you
already.
are down in the Keithland area and you have an open lane with a garage on the lane.
So like,
and you want to tear.
I'll just mute her for a sec. So if say you have a 7,200 square foot lot, 7,200 times 0.35 is 2,520. To figure out how much you can have on your main floor, you got to go divided by 1.75 under the current bylaws, which gives you 1,440. You then take the 1,440 and subtract that from the original 2,520 we had, yielding 1,080. So 1,080 is how many square feet your upper floor can be. So the upper floor can be 1,080, the main floor can be 1,440, and then that means the basement can be 1,440. So if we go 1,080 plus 1,440 plus 1,440, it equals 3,960. Now, if we do 3,960 divided by 2,520, well, there's that 57% that I came up with. What was it? Sorry. If you do 3,960 divided by 7,200, rather, which is 3,960 is like the total current allowable home space, including the basement. And then you divide that by the lot size. That's where they got this 55% from. They're just literally just pulling the basement out of the ground. Like the maths.
Are protected if we are adding increased hard surface coverage. How does reducing setbacks protect root structure?
So I would say that during construction, most existing trees are lost. And especially if we're building basements, which have a perimeter drainage system that sucks much of the flow of water towards the perimeter drainage system, we see the flow of water across the site change and trees end up dying from lack of water. So even when a very careful tree protection fence has gone up, you go back a couple of years later and invariably the trees are dying or have died. So regardless of the building setbacks, we see very little tree retention on smaller to average size lots. On large lots, that can completely change, and on lots that have some topography that kind of set apart the building site from where trees are. But I don't want to sugarcoat this. Trees are impacted by construction. But what we try to do with this bylaw is think about the urban canopy of tomorrow. And by including a landscape requirement that forces a suitable depth of soil, we can facilitate an opportunity for tree planting in the future. And there are, of course, other policies and development permit guidelines and tree permit requirements that dig into the tree issue more deeply. In terms of the setbacks, the changes are fairly modest. So this particular image that's on the screen right now shows two homes that are fairly common across the district for having what are called front entry garages. And front entry garages you often see as being just slightly proud or in front of the main house because they only have a 20-foot setback as opposed to a traditional 25-foot setback. That's the setback that we're talking about using for the main house. So that you'll still have a substantial front yard area. And of course, most front yards are set back behind the boulevard as well. So the change there is fairly modest. Side yards, yes, they've been reduced, but only by a couple of feet in most cases. So probably not a place where you'd see a lot of tree retention. The backyard tends to be the place where you see the most planting and the most enjoyment of open space. By putting, by reducing the front yard setback a little bit and by allowing those kind of side entry garages to continue, but now have living space that above them, we take some of the pressure off of the rear yard. That's the intention of thinking about the front
That's a
yard
good
differently.
change.
And
That's a good change.
and when we took that idea out to the public, we had a lot of positive support from a lot of people who said, well, I don't do a lot in my front yard, but I really love my backyard. So the more we reduce the impact and overlook and overshadowing of backyards, the
Agreed.
better it
I
is
agree
for
with
our
that.
residents. So that's what this set of rules was kind of trying to get at.
Thank you.
Those images.
I'll move on to the next question then. How do we reduce the developable area and allow the gentle density of coach houses and secondary suites that don't have the required FSR?
Not quite sure I understand the question. Is the question, if we were to lower the potential buildable area on a property, how do we still kind of support secondary suites and coach houses? And if so, I can take a stab at that. Essentially, I think it really kind of depends on how you think about housing. I live in a fairly old house myself. It's fairly modest in size. So I perhaps have a slightly different perspective than somebody who has had the luxury of living in a larger home. And also thinking about those multifamily projects we see, we know a lot of people live in units that are in the kind of 1,000 to 1,500 square foot size. So do you actually need houses to be 5,000 square foot? Potentially, you could divide that 5,000 square foot up into 3 units, but still have it be a little bit less in size. So 3 1,500 units. I'm not very good at doing math on the fly.
I mean,
4,500 square feet, right? Which is a little bit less.
Let's not get
than the square footages we're talking about.
too
For an
much down that
average
rabbit hole. That's like
lot
knocking
size.
on
But
socialist,
that
communist sort of
does
thoughts there. If somebody wants to live in a
reduce
5,000 square foot
people's
home and can
development
afford it,
potential,
they should be able to
make
do that. Why
existing
the hell
homes
not?
non-conforming, and mean that should they, heaven forbid, burn down, they would not be able to build without going through some kind of bylaw amendment process. So that's why we haven't gone there, and there's very good.
It would allow you to put a 3rd floor on an existing home as long as the home in total was only 2 stories, including the basement. So the basement now counts as a story regardless of where it is in the earth, James. So like you can have 3 stories total, if that makes sense.
Not really. Honestly, it's hard to judge how much of a difference in hard surface it will be, because we don't know how much people will take up the idea of, say, this compared to existing.
I think what they're really trying to push for is to give people the opportunity to build those coach houses that everybody's been clamoring for, but we haven't been able to build because like the rules and everything have just been so dumb. So this is really going to help open up the opportunity for coach houses theoretically.
Increase in it's just not consistent across properties, but it's not a direct, if you're increasing the buildable coverage by 15%, therefore it's going to be 15% more water into the.
But with the increase in the building permits in the last 20 years and the increase in hard surface with the displacement of water, we are taking a larger impact to our storm system than we have in the past.
We have a stormwater management plan that is
That's individual lots, but I'm saying that collective.
that sucks balls.
back to that storm system.
Mr. Milburn, do you have
Stupid ass
additional comments
stormwater
on the matter?
management plan.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but I work closely
Mm.
within engineering teams, and they have various models that they do to analyze both water, sanitary, and storm sewer impacts on the community. One thing I can say is with the development servicing bylaw and our storm sewer servicing bylaws, that we have to match essentially pre-development flow with post-development flow. And so that scales with the scale of the hard surface. So if people build more hard surface, they have to retain more water. And so that's additional retention facilities and so on the site, or additional water ingress areas. So more open areas to accommodate water ingress. So there's a proportional ratio, I guess is what I would say. When you do increase surface area, you have to increase your ability to retain the water and resume that natural flow of volumes.
Except the other thing that we've done that has changed over those last 20 years is we have allowed those basements to be cut lot line to lot line. So we've lost a significant amount of the urban canopy. And we don't ever seem to connect all of those things as we once did. We look at these applications and silos or these changes to bylaws without the information to understand the impact on the other side. So I'd be interested in that, Mayor Little.
Okay. Thank you for your response. I'm going to go back to the public here. Would anybody else like to address the meeting a first, second, or third time? Jarrett Wall and Corey Cost. Time speaker Jarrett Wall, welcome. You have 5 additional minutes to speak.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Just wish to make a few follow-up comments. One thing as you know, I've talked to you. Sorry, there's a lot of feedback here. If we can change that. Personally, I speak from a perspective of I'm a homeowner. As I said, my family situation, I told you already. I'm in the extreme midst of this, and why I advocated for this to proceed was because timing matters and the rest of that is important to get this done. However, and I've combed through this in great detail, and now with the assistance of AI for $20 a month. The funny thing about the old or the current, can you adjust the sound? This feedback's confusing me. Hello. Oh, and this one. Even the current so I just wanted to say about the simpler regulations. I'm a sports person, and we call them non-athletic regular people, NARP. And as far as development goes, I'm a non-athletic regular person. It's a joke, it's affectionate, it's not to be derogatory. Yeah, sorry. Okay. The current regulations are very difficult to understand, and even AI can't help me understand them. So we have to pay money to interpret them. Please have simpler regulations. I would ask if there's a performance metric that you anticipate reviewing with DAPR and these regulations that can be reviewed in a year from now or something. Perhaps you have that. A couple.
Yeah, Mal, very long meeting. Very, very long. Thanks for joining me and being here.
It's 25% or 25-foot width, which I think, as just a question to clarify, I think is 100-foot frontage to get 25 feet or 25% to get that basically same turning garage distance. So you're actually losing development potential on some of these in terms of how you could have a garage there, I think prior with that 400 square feet, but it's actually going to be smaller. So in fact, that front yard footprint would be less.
My watch is giving me my bedtime reminder. Don't think that's going to happen.
So if you could clarify that. And little things, I appreciate the landscaping garden plan. I think that's great. No one's talked about the mandatory garbage area, which I think is great. Parking, wish to advocate, we get our kids around on a cargo bike. People use ride hailing frequently and car sharing and use transit. And so these things I think are important to keep in mind when it comes to parking next year. And lastly, with this hearing, I believe if SMU did proceed a while back, that this would have, if there was a 1 vote difference, that there wouldn't be any public hearings and it would just have all gone through as R1, R2, R3, and there would be no conversations, I think. I could be wrong, but that being said, it's nice and kind and appreciated and appropriate that people can have a say here. And so I think that's great. And there's some great opinions being shared. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Jarrett Wall. The next speaker I have is the third-time speaker, Corey Cost. Corey Cost, can you hear me?
Your worship? Yes. This is a pretty quick question. It's been bugging my mind for years, if not decades. As you know, the district of North Vancouver features numerous kind of distinct residential, commercial, and rural communities. Do you know what the status is in some official form, or have they all disappeared from the OCP material? Do they still have some binding status to these communities like Esmond Village? So a little bit of enhancement would help quite a bit, especially when it comes to the single family homes in these specified neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Corey Cost. Okay. I see virtual speaker David Cameron wishing to speak a third time. Okay, and for a third and final time, David Cameron.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Clearly, welcome. You have 5
All right, let's go.
final minutes to address the hearing.
Thank you. No, I'll just make it real brief. With the changes to allow basements on June 1st and no subsequent change to the building height accordingly, basically allowing 2 stories above ground, 1 story below, and a building height still at 38 feet with a pitched roof, I would be in opposition as it stands right now. Thank you for your time, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, David Cameron. Joining us here in person for a third and final time, Paolo Piccini. Is that correct, Paolo? Yeah.
Good evening again.
Welcome.
Okay,
Upside down.
thank you. I think so. I just can afford, I believe so, this is North Vancouver, did you say North Vancouver? I think it feels like we already have a 3-story high here. So I think so the council should.
It's a beautiful house, isn't it?
To approve.
My team built that.
And by the way, I don't
Beautiful
like
house.
the coach houses. Okay, I don't like the coach house. Some people don't like coach houses. That doesn't matter for me. I can have extra square feet. No, you put a coach house, less square foot for the basement. Less square foot for home. So this one here, it's already something, they are available in the district. So I don't know why we argue for it to be approved. It's already 3-story high on the district of North Vancouver. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Paolo Piccini. All right. Would anybody else like to address the hearing a first, second, or third time? Okay, checking back in with staff. Have you received any additional questions you have responses to? Okay, so I'm going to go into the final step. It's a little bit archaic, but I'm just going to call it out 3 times here just to finalize the public input. Would anybody else like to address this hearing for a final time? Or sorry, for first time? Would anybody else like to address this hearing for a second time? And for a third and final time, would anybody else like to address this public hearing? Okay, I'll look to the clerk. I believe we have exhausted the public speakers list.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. I'll now look to council for a motion. Councillor Hanson, you have your hand up. Do you have a motion?
Had my hand up by accident, but I will move that this public hearing be closed and the matter be referred to the next convenient date for second and third
I'll
reading.
have you as recommending the staff recommendation we have on the screen.
Yes.
Covers that. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ma, you're
I actually still have questions, but sure, close it.
okay. Thank you very much. All right. I'm prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Okay, so what this means now that this process is closed is that council can't receive new information at this point. And so you can still ask clarifying questions of the staff and they'll do their best to respond to you. You just can't communicate directly with the council. The council has to make their decision when this matter comes back based on the information that they've heard up until this time. I will check in with the clerk now. When are you proposing for this to return for third reading?
Thank you, through your worship. We are targeting the July 13th regular meeting to return this matter to council for consideration.
July
wow.
13th? Okay, so our intent is July 13th. That's a tentative date. So that means you have to watch the agenda in the week before just to verify that it does end up at that time. It does sometimes get bumped, but they're pretty reliable. So we'll bring the matter back for third reading consideration. That's when you'll hear the arguments of council and their decision moving forward at this point. So at this point, we've completed the business of this evening's meeting. I will accept adjournment. Moved by Councillor Muri, accepted. And I will just say thank you very much to our staff for the reports and presentations for our consideration. Thank you to the members of the public for sharing your views with us at tonight's public hearing. And thank you, council.
Yeah,
Have a
super quick
fantastic evening.
turnaround.
Good night.
We'll see what happens. Well, that was a very interesting public hearing. Lots of interesting opinions and lots of thoughts expressed out there. I don't know. I mean, certainly the bylaws need to get updated. There's no doubt about that. I don't know about any of you that are still watching. A, thank you. And B, I am tired AF. I've been up since 4:30. We'll see what happens. I mean, something needs to change. I don't know if this is the right solution or not, but I suppose time will tell. So anyways, thanks for watching. Appreciate all your comments. Have